College football's 8 best programs over the next 5 years will do so with recruiting and roster management, and I'm going to tell you who they are.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the portal. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. I'm a longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst that loves to talk roster management, the portal, NIL, and everything else. So make sure you keep coming back to check us out. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, today's show is 100% about the top teams that I'm projecting over the next 5 years. I believe that these 8 schools will make at least 1, if not 2, if not 3 runs for a title, meaning you may get to at least the Final 4. I'm going to give you 6 now, and I'm going to give you 2 later, and also discuss the programs, why I left them out. I'm going to leave out a few blue bloods. Straight up, there's going to be some pretty angry people, and I'm okay with that. But I will back up my theory with points about what I've been told about their rosters or their coaching staffs, whatever it may be, and maybe one guy not sticking around as a head coach much longer. All of that a little later. But here's the criteria that I wanted to use, and this is just the baseline. Recruiting is a very generic word, but it's really roster management. So number 1, does your head coach want it? Meaning, will he go out on the trail and close? Does he organize his coaching staff, not just as good coaches, but guys that understand today's recruiting world means dealing with NIL, and almost all of them hate it. And I don't mean dislike, I mean hate it. Do it anyway. And then also understanding how to balance the portal with high school recruiting. High school is always the most important, but you can still get there with key guys from the portal to get you over the top. A school that I'm going to put in my top 8 that I'm going to discuss in about 5 minutes is the key to that. And again, I will get to that momentarily. But let's go through these 4 points again. Recruits, they got to have that head coach that wants to close, and he's got to have his staff doing the right thing. Location, no matter where you are, there's a way to do it. Oregon, for instance, that's a program that recruits well, but they know they can't get their base from their home state. They go to California, they go to Texas. They do it in different ways. If there is a local kid or somebody maybe even in Seattle, they'll go and try to get them, but they understand who they are. Don't inflate your local area, and don't underrate it either. Michigan, it's a school that is 45 minutes from Detroit. It's only a couple hours from Cleveland. It's less than 4 hours away from Chicago. They manage their base, and then they'll cherry pick Charlotte, Orlando, Dallas, Los Angeles. They figure it out. So location is important. NIL. Just because you have it doesn't mean you know how to use it. Don't burn your roster by bringing in just portal guys. Florida State had some problems with that. I've heard about some other schools not doing so well with it that have fallen off. I'll leave it at that. You've got to spend to keep your roster. Retention is huge. Use it accordingly with high school kids and the transfer portal. It's a fine line. It might be the hardest part of being a head coach and on a staff. And then finally, keep your assistants. Players, if you're going to retain players, keeping your assistants will do that. When coaches leave, players leave. Players pick coaches, not the logo on the polo. I know fans don't like to hear that, but it's the truth. So here are 6 of my 8. And again, I'll explain further on the other 2 on the backside. No particular order, but if you made me just go with 2, I'd say Texas and Ohio State. You could argue on which one's going to be more successful over the top next 5 years, but Texas and Ohio State, I think, are pretty easy. Sarkisian's not going anywhere. He's a really good coach. He understands the most pivotal spot in probably all of sport in quarterback, and it's pretty easy backyard. Speaking of location, it's Texas. NIL is deep. Boosters are deep. Oil school. They've got really good assistants like Coach Flood. They have a myriad of reasons to be a dominant program. They've been in the Final 4 the last 2 years. They're probably going to get at least 1 title in the next 5 years. Getting 2 would not surprise me. Ohio State is also the same deal. They just won the title. They have Jeremiah Smith. They've got a head coach that's now, maybe he didn't beat Michigan, but he won the national title. He's a little bit off the hot seat. He could leave if he wants, but I don't think he will. And it's a pretty darn easy job. He's got some really good assistants. He has great players. He's got a quarterback depth chart that's good. They're in a great spot. The other ones, these aren't really rocket science to me either. I'm just going to give you a few just as examples, and you can take it for whatever you want on some of these because some people are going to argue in other directions, but these are mine. Penn State. I think that James Franklin is finally going to break through and make a national title game sometime in the next 2-3 years. Could be this upcoming season. We'll see, but he has a lot of talent. He's got a good staff. They just went out and got arguably the best defense coordinator in college football, and Jim Knowles. So I think that's a pretty good pick. Michigan, Sharon Moore, they got insane NIL. Bryce Underwood helps. He understands physicality. They've got a staff that fits what they want to do. I like what he's doing. I think they will retain their roster really well. And that's also why I like Notre Dame. Coming off the runner-up in the national title, they probably do the best job of evaluating recruiting, taking kids for the long haul, redshirting, and bringing their roster through of any program. But at the same time, they're starting to use NIL better. I need to see it, just like anybody else, to finalize it as it relates to the high school game. But they are offering money to some kids now that they weren't before towards the front end of these deals. Again, I need to see it go finalized, but he knows how to coach. He has great assistants, and he gets at, like, you could argue that Marcus is the best head coach as a recruiter, organizing his staff, making sure they get after it on the trail. He holds people accountable, and he's just a great closer. They do a tremendous job. Those are some pretty easy ones, but we're not done. Let's go with one more that you probably aren't going to be surprised by. Oregon. Look, Dan Lanning is hungry. He recruits extremely well. Top 10 classes, 5-star kids in that brand. On the recruiting trail this spring so far, Oregon's probably been the most popular school amongst recruits. And that was just consistently. Like, it didn't matter who I was talking to, if I was at Under Armour, if I was Battle Miami, whatever. That's Oregon. When we come back, I'm going to name a couple more schools that you may or may not agree with, but they're my picks. You can take it any way you want. And again, I'm going to leave out a few blue bloods. That is next here on The Portal. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, even if you miss the opening tip-off. So if you want to check out that fourth quarter comeback or anything else, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. You can use FanDuel's live betting feature. If you want to talk about somebody that got hot, how many points are they going to score, over-unders on the quarter, final score, over-unders, many different ways to do that. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's name two more schools, and these probably shouldn't shock you in some ways, but maybe one does. And it's more about who I'm leaving out. Georgia's the easy one. Most people probably thought I was going to name them, but I had to leave somebody out if I'm going to leave a couple for the back end of this. Kirby's probably not taking a head coaching gig. So you got coaching stability. He loves recruiting. They spend literally more money than anybody in recruiting. $4.5 million a few years ago on recruiting, according to a report that I read, and $4.5 million was way more than anybody else. Just talking about high school, like how the visits work, how much money they spend on all the expenditures when the kids are on campus, all that stuff. They go crazy. They obviously have NIL. They understand how to retain, kind of like Notre Dame, kind of like Penn State. They understand retaining their roster. They don't take as many kids just because of big NIL, but they do it their way, and they still get 4- and 5-star kids all day long. They compete for the top class pretty much every year. I think Georgia's a pretty easy one. And here's the final part with them. He still has a really good coaching staff. I know people were down on the OC situation, etc. Kirby's going to figure it out, and their roster, especially in the trenches, it'll get better. I know O-line was a little bit down this past year too. That'll get fixed. Kirby understands roster management. They will be fine. My 8th pick is the one that I think I'll probably get some pushback with, and I believe it's an open debate. If you want to have fun with it, if you want to laugh at it, if you want to lie, or say that I'm an idiot, whatever you want. just jump on this boat. I say Ole Miss because I think Kiffin has balanced how he's going to use the portal with high school much better than, say, 2 years ago. He went all in on the portal this past year with some D linemen, etc. But he's also learned retention is key. He let a key guy go here or there. He's brought in some guys that some other people may not have, but they fit his system. He understands what his roster can do, what his coaches can do, and how it works in Oxford, Mississippi. Obviously, location-wise, it's not that hard. It's not. You're in Mississippi. It's one of the richest states in the country per capita. You're not far from Memphis. He's an hour or so from there. They'll get a few Dallas kids. He has connections in California, and they always pull somebody out of Louisiana or Alabama. They're getting those kids, and even a few Georgia kids. And this past year, they killed it in Florida. That was the icing on the cake. Once I saw that, I'm like, okay, Wayne and his staff are on the right path. Pete Golding, all those guys. I think that Ole Miss will have at least 1 or 2 runs into the Final Four over the next 5 years. Just my projection. Maybe I'm wrong. Now for the teams that I think will not make the final run. Bama, Miami. I think those teams will come really close. Tennessee, Southern Cal, and who did I miss? Oh, the easy one, the one that's probably for the most blatant reason. That's LSU. This is kind of outside the cuff, but I hinted at this at the beginning. Brian Kelly's a really good football coach, but I don't think he's going to be around necessarily the next 5 years at LSU. Coaching stability is everything in any sport. And I'm not saying he's going to get fired. He's just an older guy. There's a chance he could just retire. They could even win the title this year, but then just fall off the earth because the next guy that comes along, anytime you change coaches, you don't know. But if they win a title, I don't think LSU fans are going to be that mad. But this is about consistency over 5 years. Maybe they make it to the Final Four and he's had enough. He doesn't want to deal with NIL anymore. A lot of older coaches don't. USC, I just don't believe they can tackle well enough and prove it on defense based on how Lincoln Riley utilizes his defenses with how they practice their offense. It's just never worked, not consistently. Excuse me. So he just has to prove it to me, but they did spend big. Chad Bowden just came up from Notre Dame. He got a massive contract, over $1 million a year to be the GM. Great move. They got other guys too. And here's the key. They've got good assistants. They've improved their defensive staff in particular, defense coordinator, etc. USC has a chance, but I think this is where the stubbornness of college coaches come in. I need to see Lincoln Riley truly believe that he's got to shift a little bit of his culture, how he runs practice, and give defense a little more of their own say. We'll see if that happens. Because until I see them tackle more consistently, be better at the line of scrimmage more consistently, I'm not going to buy into them. That's just my opinion. As for Tennessee, this one was the most unique. It's a lot dependent on Nico Iamaleava. Really good kid. I like him. I met him a few years ago. I hope he has a lot of success, but he needs to take another step forward. And that would help Josh Heupel recruit just a teeny bit better. They're on that cusp of being able to win a title, especially with Nico on the roster for this upcoming season and maybe one more. Who knows? But do they do that? Does Nico take that step? Tennessee's kind of been on that cusp for a while, but they need something else. I don't even know exactly what it is, but Heupel's done a good job with recruiting. Maybe there's something else he needs to add. I don't know what that magic elixir is. They're most intriguing to me out of those. With Miami, it's just something's goofy, especially with the defensive side of the ball. And it's so surprising because he's a physical coach. I've heard some things I didn't necessarily like about last year's coaching staff, how it worked, but some of those coaches are gone. We'll see if it works, but they got to do a better job on the coaching front in Miami. However you want to define it, the things I've heard I don't like, but they can certainly attract talent. Mario's bought in. He's one of the best recruiters. Probably him or Marcus Freeman, I would say, are the two best recruiters, just one-on-one with other kids, etc. Maybe you throw Kirby in there. It's hard to say, but they are really good at Miami at attracting talent. As for anybody else, there's other teams you could throw in there that could surprise if you wanted to. I'm not saying South Carolina couldn't be a breakthrough team. I'm not saying if you wanted to say A&M, Mike Elko, absolutely. There's other teams too. Again, comment down below. Give me a shout out on X. You can find me at FB Scout _Florida. That's FB Scout _Florida. If you think that I'm completely off on a team, or if I'm way too high on a team, whatever the reason is, fire away. I've got Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame. I've got Georgia. I've got Ole Miss. Those are some pretty easy ones. But, Michigan, some people may not agree with them, but I think Jerome Morris kind of figured it out, kind of like Freeman. A year or so ago, I didn't know about those guys. We had to see them do something. And this year, they both just really improved their teams. It was coaching, and they both recruit. So we'll see. And then Dan Lanning at Oregon. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that one. Those are my 8. And I don't know, like Bama, I left out. Miami, I left out. I don't believe in Bama's defensive staff yet in terms of how they work together. There's a lot of teams like that. There's probably 5 to 10 others you could throw into the mix. Why couldn't Washington or somebody make a run? I get it. Clemson, I'm not bought in on Dabo and his staff and completely with how they use NIL in the portal. Again, the list goes on and on. If you have somebody, let me know who they are. There's plenty of blue buds I could have talked about, and I didn't, but that's okay. I want to hear what you have to say. Please like this podcast, subscribe, and share it. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and I will see you all again later.